I was sitting in my office at one of my restaurants, and I got a phone call from someone I respect greatly, a guy named John Fullerton. I consider one of the smartest people I know, and he was coming to dinner, and he wanted to see me. He wanted to come by the office before, and just sort of last minute. And I said, sure, come on up. And he came into the office, and I've known him for years, and it was like his hair was on fire. And he threw this piece of paper on my desk, and he said, this may be the most important graph on planet Earth. And I thought, okay, why? And he said, because it accurately defines the problem. And I got to go eat, but you should look at it. So off he went. And so I was a economics major at Conn during my time. I should say I was a macroeconomics major and a microeconomics survivor. I was somewhat dyslexic, and I loved information visually and always loved graphs. So, I jumped right on this. The first thing that hit me was, oh God, there it is again, sustainability. The word is getting thrown around an awful lot lately to us. Sorry about that. To those of us in the food movement, sustainability is in a very similar place to where organics was a few years ago, 10, 15 years ago. And today we have the organic frozen TV dinner, and the organic Twinkie is coming soon, and sustainability is in a dangerous place because it's being attached to all kinds of things, and it's very difficult to define. Difficult because the matrices, when you're talking about sustainability, depending on the subject matter, vary greatly. And unless you can get some kind of a global definition for it, you're not really talking about anything. I mean, we don't really know. We don't know that what we're practicing at our farm is actually sustainable agriculture. We think it's better than what's been going on, and that's actually not that difficult. But sustainable, we don't know. This, in my humble and very naive opinion in some respects, may be as close to defining it in a global sense as I've seen. It comes from an economist, ironically. They're not generally that good at the sustainability area. There's a Belgian economist. But what's really interesting is that in doing his research and coming up with this theory, he sought out a group of biologists and anthropologists, mostly in Maryland, and he examined the theory of sort of a global sustainability approach based on what makes ecosystems work. Why are ecosystems a good source and why was that a smart decision on his part? Because ecosystems have been around for millions of years. If they are there for us to study, at this point, it's a reasonable assumption for us to make that they are sustainable. They've made it this far. If we can copy what they're doing, then we're on the right track. And it turns out that these scientists in Maryland basically boiled it down to two matrices, which were the unusual part of this graph when I looked at it: efficiency and resiliency. So in ecosystems, efficiency is essentially throughput, right? That's biomass quantity for a simple definition. How much is going through the system? Resiliency is adaptability and the ability for those systems to survive over time. And the argument is, if you could raise this bottom line up a little bit and sort of put a triangle in the middle like a seesaw, the idea is to balance efficiency against resiliency. And it turns out that sustainability has a pretty narrow range, that box at the top that talks about the optimum range. You tip it a little bit towards resiliency, or I would say even more towards resiliency is probably better, you're still okay, but then the drop-off's quick. If you go in the other direction towards efficiency, you get problems very, very fast. So for food systems, and I would argue for many of our cultural systems, which end of the scale do you think we've been educating our young people and generations to focus on? Anyone? Right, we are way over here. Okay, so we're right at the bottom of the scale, and sustainability's got a serious problem. How do you balance the scale? How do you put emphasis back on resiliency to tip our chances back in a better direction? And I want to touch on, and I will in a minute, some of the things that President Higdon said earlier, some of the things that Deanne talked about, and Sam, because they're all relevant to this idea of the value of a liberal arts education. The experts, God bless them all, the MIT people and the geniuses of the year, they are efficiency trained. They are one-minded focus. It's very efficient. It's very productive in a certain sense. It's also very dangerous as we move forward. So I wanted to look at a fellow A fellow board member of mine this morning looked at this, sort of saw it in passing as I was trying to get it ready, and he said, "Nice org chart." And yeah, it's a mouthful. But this is not a new place. Savano is a little community outside of Tucson. It was founded with state money and local government support. It's about 800 acres, and it was meant to be a community of the future. And to be successful with this problem, we need to look at creating communities that tackle the issue on all of those matrices. So if you look at Savano on that scale of whether it's being resilient and efficient at the same time, they're one of the more interesting examples out there. And I'm not going to spend the time to delve into any of them. You can sort of look at some of these points and certainly follow up with me later. But one of the really interesting ones they do is they restrict the investment of capital. Because of the buzz around it, more recent buzz, there's a lot of people who want to get involved. And they very tightly control with the sort of the boxes in the outside circles how resources are deployed and how each of those resources affect the things that they care about in the middle of their community. Now, you can attack them for being Marxist, but they're not. It's not what it's about. It's about recognizing that there is a balance and that there is an interdependency and an interconnectivity and a diversity in their community that is what they have stated they want to do and what they want to be about for the future. This is the place that I work, equally confusing graph. And it's a farm, but primarily it was built as an education center. So it has some relevance to Connecticut College, and I want to get to the college last. The education center sits in the middle of a working farm. We raise animals, and we do eat them, and vegetables. All respect to Sam, we do. No beef, but we do have lots of animals there. And we raise vegetables, and we have a very active compost operation sort of feeding the system. And the restaurant, which is my business, is an integral part of this because we buy most of what the farm produces. The education center's job, essentially, is to sit in the middle of this and figure out what's interesting about what's going on around the windows and create public programming that draws the public to the place. The components, and we were not geniuses when we set this up in sort of knowing all of the implications, but the idea was to work with nature in the construction of a farm and in the practice of agriculture, as opposed to trying to control nature. 99.95% of the agriculture on this planet is run with the notion of trying to somehow control nature. What we were trying to do was fit into our ecosystem. So back to that original slide real quick, we were trying to balance in that little optimum range that allows us to operate and not be the enemy of conservationists, for example, who believe that agriculture is destroying what green land is left, and turning pastures is not the way to go. But we do have to feed people. So what are the systems that are going to help us do that? And this is an attempt on the farming level to try and create those balances. But there are more components to it that start to resemble a community. I use community a little loosely. No one actually lives here, although I do end up sleeping there often. There is a community of visitors. There is a community of about 100 employees between the restaurant and farm and education staff. And there's a community now of over 100,000 visitors that come to the place every year. So it's a very vibrant community, not unlike Con on a busy Saturday. And what is interesting is that the structure that has emerged here is one where we have recognized that our success is dependent on the success of the other attributes of the farm. And we can't succeed if they don't. And things that may seem like opportunities for us to be efficient, when weighed against the cost that it will have on one of our fellow contributors, it doesn't look worth it at all. And we spend an awful lot of time sitting around in a circle, debating these issues and trying to reach consensus on it. And one other interesting anecdote, it goes beyond the circles that are here because the customers have had to get involved, like it or not, in this process. One of the things we found was that to support the farming that we want to be doing, the farmers can't take our order as a restaurant. or as a public that enjoys the public market there, they can't be growing what people say they want to eat. They need to be growing things that are good for the soil, that are good for the ecoculture of that property. We, as the primary tenant, need to agree to buy it. And for economic reasons, we need to agree to buy all of it. And if we're doing that, then we can't offer you, if you're a customer and you come visit us, any real choices. So there are no menus anymore. We took those away. And some people come in and get very angry about that. Most of them get a good discussion with Maddie, our reservationist, on the phone, so they know what to expect. When they come and they weren't expecting it, it can get tricky. But we just don't have them. We can't have people ordering and feeling like what they're going to eat. They need to come there because they feel like eating what the farm has provided that day. And that's a system, again, that for the long term switches food, as an example, from sort of a demand-driven thought to a supply-driven thought, like what is the earth willing to give us, right, to survive. So now I want to quickly go on to Con. Here's another interesting, confusing graph. My little vision of Connecticut College, actually not mine. There's a lot of people who shared in developing this. But if you look at Con as a community, as a sustainable organization, it's been here 100 years, it has an incredibly bright future. The components that make this college run, sort of the keepers of the flame, I would put those in the outside circle, and all of the initiatives that they engage in the middle, with the goal of supplying a superior liberal arts education to students, is very much about that balance between how to do it efficiently and how to do it resiliently. And I will tell you on the future side, from an entrepreneurial standpoint or from a community activist standpoint, we need this kind of thinking. We need these kind of micro-communities to help solve problems and attack problems in a way that we can rely on. The efficiency model, you are seeing the byproducts of it in ever greater numbers and with ever greater impacts. And if we rely on that type of thinking, which I think a lot of these institutions produce, I'm trying to think of byproducts that would be relevant, the levees in New Orleans, the blackouts that you experienced up here a few years ago, the financial crisis of a couple of years ago. That's efficiency at work, right? I mean, those are assumptions and models that just are not resilient to sudden changes. And we can't afford to have those inevitably with the stakes going up each time. We need thinking that balances that. So for those of you, who are pushing the more common sustainability initiatives at Con, and I've heard over this weekend discussions of the geothermal aspects of the new science building, getting rid of bottled water and the evil Chiquita banana. I applaud all of that. I think it's really great work, and it's not to be underestimated. But the big picture of Con, in the context of real sustainability, is not new. It has been built very carefully over 100 years, and it is getting stronger. And it is an incredibly important and unique part of this school. And all you really need to do, you can certainly contribute to it, but all you really need to do to get at it is to, focus your lens and look at the community in that way. In that sense, it's very low-hanging fruit, and you should eat it and enjoy it. Thank you.